Articles of Confederation, they're written in 1777 and they're ratified in 1781. In other words, they go into effect. So it's the first constitution for the country. That's important. You need to know that. It's a written constitution, first one for all 13 colonies or all 13 states. It's a confederation form of government, meaning a firm league of friendship. Colonies would remain separate and independent. They only banded together in a cohesive defense in case of emergencies. This was done on purpose because, keep in mind, our founding fathers, the colonists had fought against a strong central government, so they feared a strong central government such as Britain. So it was a unicameral legislature. Unicameral means one house. Each state sends delegates, but only gets one vote per state, so 13 votes. States were obligated to send funds to pay for government officials and the military. States were obligated to send troops to man and maintain a central defense. Obligated means they're responsible. That doesn't mean they have to. In a lot of states, either sent older men or didn't send men at all, and they didn't always pay for government either. 9 states had to agree to pass a law, and to change the articles, to amend the articles, all 13 states had to agree. So these two provisions right here made this document extremely hard to change. Instead of, like in our Constitution, you have a simple majority to change a law, you had to have 72% of the states on board. So that's extremely hard to get. Not to mention, when you're going to change the articles, all 13 states had to agree to change, which made it impossible to change. In our system, it's 75%. It's 2/3, 75% of states and of Congress. So, foreign relations problems. States set up individual trade agreements between the states and foreign countries. So in other words, you had 13 different trade agreements plus the national government, so that would be 14. We lose favored trading rights with England. The U.S. refuses British claims in court. In other words, we're not going to give them money we own. So we have problems here growing really over these trade agreements, these 13 to 14 different trade agreements. Spain worried about the U.S. Western expansion. This is another foreign relation problem. They worried that we were going to continue to move west and encroach on Spanish lands, and they had good reason to worry about that. As far as France is concerned, their financial problems, we had little to help them with when they had financial problems, but if you look, they didn't really gain much from helping us out either. Remember, they were a crucial ally we had during the American Revolution, and they didn't really gain much for it. The Barbary pirates, these are nations in North Africa that attack U.S. ships for refusing to pay a bribe or a tribute. Keep in mind, we will start paying this tribute, and it will end with Thomas Jefferson. George Washington and John Adams, as we get to them, we'll talk about them. They did pay this bribe each year. Accomplishments under the Articles: it set up a post office, the only government agency that is self-supporting. It created postal roads. And if you look here, these are all things you need to know, by the way, for your test. The Land Ordinance of 1785 set up a survey system to sell off the Northwest Territory. And basically what it does is, if you have been to any of these Northwest Territory states like Ohio, Indiana, the roads run north and south, east and west because of this survey they did in 1785. Also, they set up towns to have government buildings in the same parts of each and every one of these towns. So that's why when you go to these towns in that area, they often look the same, and the roads are typically straight north and south, east and west. Not always, but typically. So in 1787, we have the Northwest Territory Act is created. And you need to know this one because we still use it to this day. When we admitted Alaska and Hawaii into the Union, we used the Northwest Territory Act to do so. And it allows a path to create new states in the Union. This is actually something we still use today. There you go. Provides a method for allowing new states to enter the Union. So, problems with the Articles. States were not fairly represented in Congress. The highly populated states were not equally represented. No central authority to negotiate with foreign countries, and no authority to make states comply with legislation, and no power to collect taxes or impel troops into service. They had no common currency. We'll talk about this in a minute. All states had to agree to amend the Constitution. 9 out of 13 states had to agree to new legislation. Remember, that's like 72% instead of a simple majority, and no system of authority to borrow money. So here's some things that were happening. Believe it or not, states disputed their borders, because of taxes and things like that. If you have a profitable business on the border, of course, each state's going to want that business. So states had border disputes. All states, every one of them had border disputes of some sort. States levied heavy taxes on themselves to pay for the war. They did not send money to the national government. This is especially true in the South. The South's going to actually pay for most of the American Revolution during this period of time. States created their own currencies. So you had 13 different currencies plus the national government's currency. And that's why often was said it wasn't worth a continental, because the dollar bill under the Articles of Confederation was a continental. So you had currencies that were basically competing with each other in the states. Each state's currency competed with one another's. States levied tariffs on one another, so they would tax one another. So North Carolina would tax Virginia, and South Carolina would tax North Carolina, and so on. States refused to acknowledge any national law they did not like. So you need to put a star by Shays' Rebellion. He's a Massachusetts farmer who rebels against foreclosures on property due to high taxes. What happened here? Daniel Shays was a soldier in the Continental Army. He fought for independence, and he was promised that he would get paid. Guys, George Washington had to give out IOUs during the American Revolution, and basically that meant that the government would pay these soldiers back at a later date. Well, they hadn't. Massachusetts had not paid him back, and they raised taxes on his property, and they were going to foreclose on his property. And he said, wait a minute, you can't foreclose on my property. You haven't paid me the money you owe me to pay the taxes with. So he rebelled. And actually, this rebellion's put down it's a peaceful rebellion. It's put down without any death, without gunfire. But basically, the national government had to hire mercenaries to take care of this problem and to police it, because they didn't have a national army. Keep that in mind. That comes up later with George Washington. So leaders of the states were convinced that more rebellions like this were going to happen without a strong central government, and they were right, because we had not paid these troops back, and we owed them a lot of money. So we had to have a way to take care of this stuff. And this is going to lead what this is supposed to say here. This picture's covering up. This led to the Annapolis Conference. And here with the Annapolis Conference, it was called to discuss how to fix the government and avoid another revolution. Only 5 states are going to end up showing up to this thing, and they're mainly from the South because of inclement weather in the North. So 5 states showed up, and then they got up with the rest of the states and said, hey, let's try to fix this stuff. So the states were deeply in debt. Taxes were too high, led to Shays' Rebellion. Interstate commerce is a mess, simply because you had all these different currencies. You had each state taxing one another, and it just wasn't good. We had a lot of internal tariffs on states taxing one another. Foreign trade, of course, with all these different trade agreements, it was very complex. So if you want to, here's a video, the Articles of Confederation explained in 1 minute. So you have to ask yourself, did the Articles of Confederation work? Now, if you are a states' rights advocate, you'd say this is the greatest thing to ever happen, because this will be the only time that the states have complete power over government. And this is where they have their greatest period of power. So if you're a states' rights guy, if you're a states' rights person, then you'd say, yeah, this looks pretty good. If you see the problems with not having a cohesive government, a centralized government, and you see these problems that I have pointed out to you, you're going to say, yeah, we need to do something about this. There were a lot of people who had experience in government and who were running in these states. They were running government in these states. They saw these problems and they knew we needed to have a fix. So the answer here is, did the articles work? No, they did not for a national government. But like I said, you could argue if you're a states' rights person that this was the greatest period of power for states to have power, and you would be right.